Fortnite is on the Nintendo Switch too, and it's my job to figure out just how broken this version is. Because if you weren't aware, Nintendo's last console made this game absolutely unplayable. And I've done so many videos on that version. It's atrocious. So I just need to see how much it's improved on this new hardware. I'll be playing every major mode this game has to offer, including the epic shooters all the way to the Lego modes. I still can't really wrap my head around the fact that there's Lego in this. What in the world? I'll be going over everything they've improved, changed, or still haven't added. And what better way to start than not playing the game at all? We gotta boot up the game first, and already I can tell. It's much faster than the Switch 1 version. Who could have seen this coming? A faster console loads the game faster. Not only is it much faster and things actually load now, but selecting a skin doesn't take forever to preview. Navigation is smoother. It's not nearly as choppy, and it makes something that should be simple actually work. Wow, that's how bad the Switch 1 version was. Navigating menus and loading up character previews was a complete chore. But I think one big thing that makes the menu different in this version is this. Look, it's a cursor. That's right, mouse mode is enabled, because if you didn't know, one big quirk about these Joy-Cons is the fact that you can place it down on a surface and use mouse mode. This is wild. But anyways, I'll talk about that a little bit more as we play. First, let's jump into our first mode, Battle Royale. And I'm including the other third-person shooter modes here too, like Fortnite OG and Reload. But yes, Battle Royale. It's the most popular game mode in Fortnite and the one that put the game on the map. I think you all know the drill at this point. There are 100 players on the map, and your one job is to go around absolutely obliterating people after collecting weapons, cars, and whatever this thing is. And while you're trying to stay alive on this massive open world map, the storm keeps shrinking, and you gotta make sure you don't die from it. Now, as I'm sure you can already tell, wow, this game looks so much better than the Switch 1 version. I'm in disbelief. Let's break this down. First off, I can actually see detail on things. The resolution and textures are actually good. The Switch 2 version now runs at a much higher resolution, 1224p docked and 900p handheld. That is much better than the old Switch 1's resolution at 880p docked and 660p handheld. That's a major difference. It makes the whole picture way sharper and lets us see way more detail than before. And you can definitely see a huge improvement in the overall environment, especially how much more detail you can see from far away. On the Switch 1, when you were dropping into the map, it would often look like a low poly disaster. The map couldn't load in time, and even your character and glider would take a few moments to pop in. You might even look poor and spawn as a default. This is tragic news, I know. Like, you couldn't even tell what the textures were supposed to be. And even after things loaded, most of the environment still stayed in that janky, broken looking state. But now on the Switch 2, I'm happy to report that this just isn't the case anymore. Jumping from the bus and landing on the map, everything's already loaded in. I know it sounds like such a basic expectation, but for the longest time, Switch 1 players couldn't even see where they wanted to land. Now on Switch 2, it's actually possible. And it's largely thanks to the speed of the Switch 2's internal storage. With its faster SSD, it can load assets quicker and have them ready before you need them, something the old Switch just couldn't do. And even after everything loads in, the environment just looks so much better. In the distance, I can actually see higher quality trees and rocks, which honestly look completely different from before. They're the same, they just look different. The foliage looks better too, with seemingly more grass and ground details. I can't actually tell if there's more grass, the grass just looks better, which makes it look like there's more grass. And seriously, the roads and gravel don't look like lumps of clay and mud anymore. They actually have definition now. Characters also look more detailed and sharper now. Like, I can actually make out what this face is supposed to look like. It's not just some blurry blob. And speaking of faces, the anime characters on the Switch 2 version actually look good now. On the Switch 1, any cartoon or anime styled character looked absolutely cursed. Goku was a mess, and Morty looked like he was ready to die. But now, they just look normal. To be fair, on the Switch 2, there's still a little glitchiness in some parts of the cartoony styles, but they look better. One of my favorite updates they made to characters, something a lot of Switch 1 players might not have even realized, is the amount of floppiness. Here's what I mean by that. Fortnite finally enabled something called clothing physics. On the Switch 1, a character's hair or cape might move a little bit, but not that much. People talk about it in terms of how many faces an object has. You might have seen those shorts, which I'm incredibly addicted to, just watching more and more faces as it goes on. Here's what I mean. But essentially, the more faces an object has, the floppier it gets. And on Switch 2, oh boy, everything is floppy. It's flopping around like there's no tomorrow. They've added so many faces, I don't even know what to do with myself. Playing as a character with a cape is epic now. It just feels more alive, and it's way more satisfying to look at. There's just so much in this mode that looks better and feels different. Literally everything has higher quality textures, even just on basic structures and reflections. Speaking of textures, on the Switch 1, you'd see textures spawning in right in front of you as you walked, but on the Switch 2, this doesn't happen, or at least as noticeably. Textures are already loaded in before you see them, like it should be. And while we're on the topic of things popping in, the Switch 2 handles environmental pop-in so much better. Unlike the Switch 1, the grass doesn't just spawn right in front of your eyeballs, as noticeably. It's already there and you walk up to it. It also helps when spotting enemies on the map. map. Instead of seeing a stuttery, low-quality mess of a player in the distance, you can actually see a real human shape running around at a good frame rate. This is absolutely better than the Switch 1. My goodness, why is this game still on Switch 1? I don't know how. Another huge difference in the Switch 2 version is the lighting. It looks fantastic. On the Switch 1, everything just looked bare and washed out, but on the Switch 2, the environments, the characters, the weapons, everything looks way better thanks to the massive lighting upgrade. The lighting is fully dynamic throughout the whole game, and it looks incredible. Just look, even the shadows are sharper and way less pixelated, and now they're actually applied to most objects. There's also ambient occlusion on rocks and trees, and that just makes them look a lot less flat than before. If you don't know what I mean, well, this is what I mean. Here's a side-by-side comparison. You're welcome. Also, reflection check, look at the water. It actually looks like water now, instead of a sheet of sad blue. The Switch 2 reflects the environment, and it looks so good. I want to swim in it myself. These graphics undeniably look better, and from what we've seen, even surpassed the PS4 and Series S in some ways. But I think the biggest graphical leap this version has is the frame rate. That's right, this game runs at 60 frames per second. The Switch 1 version barely held 30, it constantly dipped and stuttered. But the Switch 2 version, it's a solid 60, baby. Every once in a while, it might hitch a little bit, but generally speaking, this is smooth, and I love it. Finally makes the game feel faster, smoother, and just so much more playable. Now, one thing this game is missing though is 120 frames per second. I know, it's sad, and you can cry. I honestly thought they'd be able to crank it up. I mean, the Series S can run Fortnite at 120 frames per second, and the Switch 2 is almost that powerful. Now, you techie boys out there might be able to prove me wrong, but I definitely think that with a bit of optimization, they probably could push 120 frames per second, right? Maybe I'm being too ambitious, I don't know. But what if they did drop the graphics settings to the Switch 1 levels on the Switch 2? Are you telling me it still couldn't run at 120 frames per second? Maybe not, but it doesn't feel impossible. I'm just surprised it's not here. We've seen mobile versions of this game run at 120 frames per second, so I don't know. This is obviously more powerful than your average smartphone. Also, really, it's a good time to mention you can't really adjust the graphics settings at all. It's just the same one. There's like a power saving mode, but it's whatever. Anyway, graphically, the Switch 2 version still nails it for me. I love it. Just like I love the fact that you're hitting that subscribe button right now. Wow, thank you so much for doing that. That's so kind of you. Let's talk about some of the other things that changed about the Switch 2 version. Like how nobody looks poor anymore. That's right. If you've ever played the Switch 1 version, you might have noticed that most skins actually load in as defaults to save the system from having to process them. But on the Switch 2, from what I can tell, every skin actually loads in. You might still see one or two stragglers running around, but for the most part, everyone's skin is actually visible now, which is great because it lets you show just how sweaty you are. Cheers to that. Oh, I didn't think you'd notice. I got new Vandy Club mugs. If you get one, send me a Discord. Don't you want to be part of the epic Vandy Club? But let's move on from the graphics of Battle Royale because there's more to life than graphics. Am I right, boys? Let's talk about how the game actually feels. Because there's one major gameplay tweak in this version that not only makes it completely different, but potentially gives this console an unfair advantage against other platforms. And I think you already know what I'm gonna say. Say it with me. Mouse mode. I said mouse mode. Yes, you can use mouse mode, and I'm kind of conflicted about it, but also at the same time, I can't stop using it. Help me. If you place your Joy-Con on the side and move it around, you get standard mouse controls just like a PC. And this is a big deal because PC gamers are always flexing on console players, but how they've got better precision and accuracy, especially in Fortnite. But not anymore. Kind of. See, at first when I started playing with mouse mode enabled, I realized this was actually the first time I'd ever actually used a mouse for this game, or really any competitive shooter. So needless to say, I got absolutely bodied by every other player on the map, at least for the first few rounds. I was not good with mouse mode, and I'm still probably not good with mouse mode. But I mostly blame the fact that I don't really play PC games with a mouse. If I'm playing a PC game, I'm usually using a controller or I'm on my Steam Deck, and that does not have a mouse. But in this case, I didn't just want to say, oh well, I give up. I wanted to learn it because I genuinely believe that once I get used to it, a mouse has the ability to make you better at aiming and just better at the game. So I played with mouse mode for several hours and eventually I started to get the hang of it. But I also learned a few gripes along the way. First of all, you can't use the buttons and analog sticks at all during the menus when mouse mode is enabled. You have to use the cursor. I guess it's not that big of a deal, it's just kind of weird. Especially since on the Nintendo Switch 2 home menu, you can seamlessly switch between mouse mode and standard inputs. I know mouse mode is new to developers, so maybe this will be improved in future updates. experience. Another thing, in menus, if you want to click on something, you can't just use the A button. You have to use the back trigger. Again, not a deal breaker, just something that took a bit of getting used to. Could be a me problem, I don't know. Now, a quirk about mouse mode is that you kind of need a mouse pad. Nintendo boasts that you can use mouse mode on your couch or your lap, and they're right, you can. But it's a little inconsistent, and in a competitive shooter, that's not what you want. I found that using a mouse pad gave me a way more stable experience. You don't need to be at a desk either. I used mine on the couch and it worked fine. I think the texture of my couch maybe was messing it up before, but a mouse pad fixed it. Now, my biggest issue with mouse mode has to be the comfort. Especially when I first started playing, my hands would get tired fast. I could feel the tendons in my arm getting sore just from trying to aim. That was during my learning phase, and I wasn't used to holding the Joy-Con like that. But over time, I found a bit of a sweet spot and was able to play for longer without discomfort. I don't think it's bad long term or anything, it just takes some getting used to, especially if you're playing on a couch instead of a desk. And honestly, I like playing on the couch. I am a console gamer. I've said this before. If I wanted to sit at a desk all day, I'd build an epic PC gaming rig, but I don't. This is why I like the Nintendo Switch 2. It's convenient. Bite me. Sorry, I got really intense there. I don't know why I said that. Don't bite me, please. Another slight issue is how awkward the face buttons feel in mouse mode. Like using A, B, X, and Y just feel kind of off at first. And the fact that you still have to click the right stick to crouch, even though you're not using it to move the camera, it genuinely took a while to wrap my head around for some reason. Again, my brain just takes a while to comprehend these kind of things. That's it for my mouse mode rant. I like it. Another feature the Switch is known for is gyro aiming, and without a doubt, the Switch has some of the best gyro controls in the business. And in this version of Fortnite, it feels fantastic. I think the gyro tech in the Switch 2 has just improved overall, but the real reason it feels so good is the smooth frame rate. The higher frame rate makes everything feel faster and more accurate. And even when comparing it to other platforms like the PS5, the gyro feels better on the Switch, and I can't even tell you why. But over gyro, I'm still probably going to use mouse mode and try and be an epic PC gamer on my Nintendo Switch 2. At least for now, just to show them. By them, I mean PC gamers. They always make fun of me. Anyways, again, it's fresh, I'm still trying to get the hang of it, and I think that mouse mode really changes how this game will be played on the Switch. And it also just makes me curious about how future games will take advantage of it. Now, there's also a brand new, cool little twist on Battle Royale, Blitz. It's kind of crazy. Every player starts off with a random medallion, and as you play and destroy people, you upgrade and get stronger with random buffs to your character. Random weapons drop too, and some of them are super powerful. Unlike the regular Battle Royale mode, Blitz doesn't have 100 players. Instead, it's just 32. The map is also much smaller, so matches are way faster. This was actually designed with mobile in mind, but honestly, it's still really fun on console or PC because it's just nice, quick, and it gets to the point. And on the Switch 2, there's no exception. Maybe it's because it's a mobile console, so it's kind of perfect for this, or maybe it's because I can finish a match really fast and it stimulates my brain. Also, it runs beautifully. Very smooth, probably because there aren't as many assets to load in because it looks a lot less graphically advanced. I really like it. These are fast, chaotic little matches, and because it's new, I had to talk about it and how well it runs on the Switch 2. Also the mouse mode, peak. Let's move on to another game. Creator maps. I don't know why I'm on my couch again. Creator maps can be made by literally anyone. Even me if I was smart enough to figure it out. And even you could make one. Because you are smart enough to figure it out. You're smart. I love you. Heck, there's already a bunch of AI slop on there as we speak. You gotta love the grind. These maps vary in scale. You might get a simple tycoon game or a massive raid boss mode where waves of enemies come crashing at you. My point is, they can either be really graphically intense or be able to run on a toaster, aka the Nintendo Switch 1. After testing a few maps on Switch 2, these are a little rougher than I expected. On the Switch 1, creative maps were all over the place. They were playable, but because the scale of the game varied so much, it was a coin toss whether they'd run properly at all. So my hope with the Switch 2 was that it could brute force its way through a lot of the frame rate issues we had before. And while it's definitely improved, what I've noticed is that these creative maps still squeeze as much juice from the system as possible. I played a few, and almost all of them had some frame rate issues. Now let me just start by saying they still look pretty decent. The graphics are still similar to Battle Royale, and I respect them for trying to hit 60 frames per second. But when stuff starts popping off, cars exploding, hordes of zombies flying around with particle effects everywhere, the game starts to hitch. So I'll give them props for being way more playable than on Switch 1, but yeah, these still need some optimization. Now, one way that the Switch 1 prevented it from exploding on creator maps was with resolution scaling. When a game got too intense, it would just downgrade the resolution mid-game to keep it running. On the Switch 2, I don't really know if it does this. I didn't notice it happening, at least not in the same way. And I know there's some fancy AI upscaling tech in here, but I'm not gonna pretend like I know what I'm talking about. All I know is that if it does do resolution scaling, it's way less obvious than in the Switch 1. That's all I'll say. I'll leave it at that. I don't really play creative maps that much anyways, so if you do, let me know your experience down in the comments, especially if you play it on Switch 2. Now moving on, Lego Fortnite. I don't know why I keep doing this. I gotta stop. They are constantly updating this mode. They've added stuff like major bosses, farming, vehicles, and I tried to get back into it a while ago, but it never really stuck for me. That said, I did notice a couple new things. Like there's a new dash attack animation and a new higher jump when you dash. That's so fun. Visually, once again, there's a massive difference compared to the Switch 1. The Switch 2 brings in all the same upgrades as we saw in Battle Royale. The textures are cleaner, the foliage is instantly better, and the grass, my boys, look at the grass. I could lay in this. And in the distance, rocks don't just look like blobs, they have real shape and texture now. Everything about the visuals is upgraded. The biggest standout for me is the reflections on the actual Lego pieces. On the Switch 1, they just look like plain plastic blocks, kind of like with a matte finish. But on the Switch 2, they have that shiny Lego look, like real Lego bricks. The lighting and reflections make them pop, and it's actually kind of crazy how much more realistic they look now. Also, this whole mode runs at 60 frames per second, and that's epic. I love it. This mode did give me a couple glitches though. I was building something and the blue outline that shows where you're placing blocks was acting a little glitchy. And when I dropped from the battle bus, the game made it look like the entire map was underwater for some reason. Boys, where we droppin'? My bathtub. That was dumb. Other than that, it's just regular Lego Fortnite. However, there's one feature that is completely missing from Lego Fortnite. Mouse mode is gone. They completely removed the ability to use mouse controls to look around, and I have no idea why. That's how you look around on PC, so why wouldn't that be implemented here? I guess this mode doesn't need it, but it's still strange that it's not here, especially since building Lego structures would totally benefit from that level of accuracy and precision. Using the mouse feature would have made building easier, no doubt. Still, I didn't really spend too much time in Lego mode. I do appreciate that it's an entire survival mode inside of Fortnite, and I really respect that they not only recreated almost every skin as a Lego figure, but they also recreated every emote. That's next level. There is a slight performance issue I had with the game mode, and it was mainly when I was placing down massive builds. If I previewed them over other structures, it would just cause some crazy frame dips. I'm assuming this is just a bug in this version of the game, but really, it's not that big of a deal. That's the only time I had a frame rate issue in this mode. But this isn't the only Lego mode, since any map creator can use the Lego assets for custom maps. Even the actual Lego group has made some maps in here too. Another main Lego mode I'm really excited to check out on the Switch 2 is Lego Brick Life, because it was completely broken on the Switch 1. So, will it be any better now? Let's find out. Now, for some reason, people call this Lego GTA. This is not Lego GTA. That's what Lego City Undercover was for. This is more like Sims. You get jobs from NPCs, decorate and customize your house, and yeah, I don't really like this game. It's not for me. Regardless, I forced myself to play it. And if you've seen my video talking about it on the Switch 1, you know this game had no right existing on that console. It was basically unplayable, running at 10 to 20 frames per second on average while just walking through the city. The draw distance was horrible, and it looked so bad. I know that I've been talking a lot about low poly models, but in this mode, they stayed low poly, like permanently. Everything looked glitched and broken. I'd drive up to a tree and it would just glitch out my camera and look like a random green blob. If I spawned or walked up to a car, it would be this smushed together Play-Doh version that wouldn't load properly until I'd been driving it for a while. And even after it finally loaded in, if I opened the menu, everything would need to load again when I exited back out. And then there were the NPCs, the super important ones you need to talk to for jobs, just wouldn't spawn. They were replaced with these weird blue floating ghost thingies. Add that to the fact that I didn't love the premise of the game to begin with, and yeah, safe to say, this is one of my least favorite games I've ever played, at least in Fortnite on the Switch 1. But how is it on the Switch 2? Let's finally answer that question. I mean, overall, it does look much better. The really awful graphics issues are gone. The low poly models load in now, the NPCs actually spawn, and the weird game-breaking bugs seem fixed. The game is fully playable now and totally enjoyable if you're into this kind of thing. But there's one thing I was shocked by. The frame rate is still pretty inconsistent. Yes, the game targets 60 frames per second like the rest of Fortnite, but just walking around the city still causes dips. That's not unplayable by any means, but it's definitely noticeable. Other than that, there's nothing crazy to report. Oh, and surprise, surprise, no mouse mode here either. So yeah. But we're actually not done with Lego yet. A brand new Lego mode just released, and it's called Lego Fortnite Expeditions, which is kind of wacky. This isn't the classic survival mode like Lego Fortnite Odyssey, and it's also not the life sim like Brick Life. No, this is completely different. In this game mode, you pick from 3 classes. Each class has super duper magic abilities. One of them you can fly around and shoot things. The other one, you just have knives and guns. And that's the one I picked because I'm a baller. This game mode is actually actually very hefty, more hefty than I initially expected. Not only is there new crazy abilities, but you can also upgrade yourself, giving the game a nice sense of progression, and I love progression. The gameplay loop is pretty simple. You mostly run around doing small objectives like trying to stay in a circle while enemies swarm you, fun stuff like that, and you can do it with other players online or your party. There's always someone there to help you up, especially after you die, like I did several times. And because there's lots going on, it can get very hectic. So how does it run on Switch 2? Actually not that bad, but I'll be honest, it's not running as buttery smooth as I'd like. There are some frame dips every now and then from the sheer number of enemies, and it does this thing where the frame rate halves just for the enemies on screen to save power when things get crazy, which kinda sucks, but I get it. This game is very flashy, and these types of graphical cutbacks make sense. Thankfully, it still tries to hit 60 frames per second, and for the most part, it does. And yes, there are bugs. The game literally crashed on me. Now, I was playing it on the first day it released, so I am cutting it some slack. At least it's not the Switch 1 version. I briefly tried it on Switch 1 in handheld mode, and yeah, this has constant hitching, bad textures, the works. It has a lot of problems, but you should have expected that by now. Moving on from LEGO, let's talk about my favorite mode in the whole game. And if you've seen my videos, you already know what I'm going to say. Come on, say it with me. Fortnite Festival! Okay, I'm actually gonna stop standing on the couch now. Yes, Fortnite Festival is my favorite mode. I absolutely love it. I used to shred Rock Band and Guitar Hero back in the day, so the fact that I still can in Fortnite with all my skins that I paid V-Bucks for is just amazing. This was the update I was most excited for on the Switch 2 because the Switch 1 version had some major flaws that made it kinda rough. First off, on the Switch 2, it finally runs at 60 frames per second, which you were probably expecting at this point. But my goodness, it's so smooth. One of the biggest problems with Festival on Switch 1 was that it ran at 30 frames per second, but even worse than that, it wasn't consistent. Brother, it's a rhythm game, and it got especially bad when more notes started showing up. And since I absolutely tear it up because I'm a Festival legend, the game would just fall apart. And then the background would glitch out, the input lag felt way worse, and it just wasn't a good time. But now, it's all cleaned up, and it feels great. I actually want to play this again. The game is smooth, the Joy-Con buttons feel snappy, and just being able to play this on the go is incredible. Plus, the Switch 2 is way louder, and the speakers are actually decent now, so I can hear the music I'm playing. Shocking, I know. Now I know what you're thinking. Trust me, I do, because I'm thinking it too. Does it support the Riffmaster? And if you don't know what the Riffmaster is, it's that plastic guitar that completely changes how the game feels. It adds a whole new level of difficulty and fun. It's just like the classic Rock Band and Guitar Hero guitars, and it makes the game so much better. So, does it work on Switch 2? No. I'm upset and incredibly disappointed. I just figured the Switch 1 was too weak to handle it, and fair enough. But now that we're on the Switch 2, there's really no excuse. The Riffmaster works on last-gen Xbox and PlayStation consoles. It should be easy to support it here too. Now, I'll throw them a bone here. It's probably just not compatible with the Switch 2's hardware yet because there's separate Riffmaster models for Xbox and PlayStation, so it makes sense they'd need to build a new one for Nintendo's system. And I really hope they do. And I feel like it's pretty likely. PDP, the company that makes the Riffmaster, makes a ton of Nintendo Switch accessories already. They've even sent me controllers before, and even the Riffmaster. And I'm not saying this to glaze them up. This isn't even sponsored. I just genuinely love the Riffmaster. I could eat it. Also, PDP, if you're listening, I need a drum kit, please. I'm begging you. Next up, we've got Rocket Racing, aka Rocket League's racing game mode. And let me just say, it feels so weird playing this after putting in over 20 hours of Mario Kart World recently. But regardless, I had to test this out, and this is actually one of my favorite Fortnite modes. Or at least it was before Mario Kart World came in, and it completely changed my brain. Because that game is peak. I love Mario Kart World. In Rocket Racing, I love the mechanics. I love how it lets me use my overpriced car that I definitely regret buying, and the tracks themselves are genuinely fun to drive on. Best of all, it feels really fast. It's a solid arcade racer through and through. Now back on the Switch 1, we had some problems. It was stuck at 30 frames per second, and that wasn't even the worst part. The resolution was lower than my height, and the textures might as well have not existed at all. Everything looked flat and smeared, and don't even get me started on the first lap of every race. The track would slowly morph in, right in front of you, and it would actually make it difficult to know where you were driving. But now that we've got the Switch 2, it's better in every single way. Everybody say it with me. 60 frames per second. Okay, I actually gotta stop that now. That's it. It plays at 60 frames per second. Yes, and not only that, but it looks great. They've clearly enabled a lot more effects, and the resolution bump means I no longer feel like I forgot my glasses at home. The textures look sharp, the cars look shiny, and thank goodness the track no longer has this weird morphing thing at the start of every race. The only issue I ran into was that on the first lap, the ground textures didn't seem to be fully loaded in for a few seconds. Just a small hiccup, nothing major. Other than that, I honestly don't really have any complaints here. It's a rock solid version of the game. That said, it's missing one thing: Mouse mode. Oh no. But actually, who cares about this one? I don't really care. That would have been the most cursed way to drive ever. So yeah, it's fine. It doesn't need to be here. Next up, Ballistic. Fortnite's attempt at a full-on first-person shooter. This one's a 5v5 team-based mode where the goal is simple. Plant the explodey thing and either defend it or try to stop the other team from doing the same. Classic stuff. I suck at it. Every once in a while, I start to get the hang of it, but my gamer blood simply does not run in the direction of first-person shooters. I don't know what to tell you. Regardless, I still attempted to play it like an absolute Chad, and eventually, I think I kinda got the hang of it again. Thankfully though, this version is already much better than the Switch 1 version. For those of you who forgot, that version was actually fine, but it had all the usual issues. You know the drill, 30 frames per second if you're lucky, bad textures, bad resolution, you get it. And I think some of the biggest problems I had back then were just because the mode was brand new. Sometimes it would freeze, and the Switch 1 just wasn't optimized for it yet. Now, the Switch 2 version. My first match was completely broken. Not only did it take ages to get into the match, but when the game finally started, I couldn't even play. My camera was just floating in the middle of the map, not attached to my character at all. But if I looked at my minimap, I could see my character was moving around. I was actually watching myself from some sort of weird angle, like I was spectating my own game. It was kind of wild. So I went back to the lobby and tried again, and thankfully, it worked the second time. Also, my level up icon was just a random default skin for some reason. That was weird. Now, to be fair, some of my issues with this game mode come down to personal taste. I don't really love this style of shooter, and all the loading kinda kills the vibe. Like, there are multiple rounds per match, so if your team gets wiped, you reset and go again. It's just not my thing. Also, matchmaking feels really slow. Not necessarily a Switch 2 problem, but it's something I noticed. That said, the Switch 2 does still clear up a lot of the issues I had on the Switch 1. The resolution looks good, it doesn't glitch when you move your head too fast. Yes, that was a thing on the Switch 1. And aiming is just generally way better. The sticks don't feel as dinky, and the Joy-Cons are way more comfortable now. Gyro also works, though even that wasn't very helpful on the old system. And of course, this mode is perfect for mouse mode. It's too bad this mode doesn't support mouse mode. Yes, that's right. Mouse mode cannot be played in Ballistic. That actually shocked me. Why? This would have been the ideal use case for it. This mode needs more precision than Battle Royale does, so not having mouse support here is actually insane. I'm sure they'll add it eventually. It just feels weird that it's not already here. At least it looks better for now. Next up, Fall Guys. I'm gonna be real with you, I genuinely forgot that Fall Guys were in Fortnite. I had nothing to say about them other than the fact that they are still here. They run at 60 frames per second, the resolution looks sharp, and mouse mode doesn't work in these modes either. Fall Guys is Fall Guys, and that's all I got. Now there's technically another game mode that I don't really talk about because it changes so often, and that's in-game events. That's right, I did play the newest Fortnite Star Wars Live event on Switch 2, and yes, it made the console chug a bit. It was honestly fine at first, it looked good, ran smooth, but then all of a sudden, there was like 1,000 Star Wars blasters that started firing, explosions were going off everywhere, and the frame rate dipped pretty hard actually. It was still playable, but if that's how the Switch 2 handled it, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened on the original Switch. That thing would have gone up in smoke. Aside from that one intense burst though, it was pretty smooth for the rest of the time, and I approve. Now, those were all the modes, but I wanted to talk about the Switch 2 version's vast amount of quirks, because there are a lot of them. Like the fact that you can play this game in handheld mode, which might not seem like a big deal, but I genuinely think this is the best version of handheld Fortnite ever. Let me explain. I've tried a ton of other handheld PCs out there, and I've downloaded Fortnite on all of them, and yes, most of them can run the game decently, but every single one I've tested has this annoying frame drop issue. Doesn't matter how low you put the graphics, there's always this random stuttering. Plus, some handheld PCs just have issues with Fortnite in general because of the Epic Games Launcher and the anti-cheat nonsense. It's just not stable. Now, maybe this has improved in the last year, but what I love about the Nintendo Switch and console gaming in general is that the games come pre-optimized for the hardware. When Fortnite came to the Switch, the devs made it run the best it possibly can on that specific system. That's why the Switch 2 version is an incredible handheld experience. It's actually well optimized. With handheld PCs, you always have to fiddle with graphics settings, and even then, there's still that dumb frame rate hitching. The Switch 1 was actually the only truly optimized handheld version of Fortnite until now. So getting a truly optimized handheld Fortnite experience on a more powerful console with the Switch 2, that's something I've been waiting for a long time. I can actually play handheld now without worrying the game is going to randomly stutter for no reason. The Switch 2 hardware is so much better than other handhelds, especially compared to the Switch 1. Like those dinky little sticks on the Switch 1 made playing Fortnite a nightmare. Now on the Switch 2, I can actually play for a long time without being in agony. You also get way better precision in aiming because the console is more comfortable to hold, and those updated analog sticks help a ton. The screen is also much bigger, especially if you're coming from the Nintendo Switch Lite model. You can see stuff in the distance way easier, and you're getting a higher resolution too. Remember, in handheld, the Switch 2 plays at 900p instead of the Switch 1's blurry 660p. The screen is also brighter, even brighter than the OLED model. Just slightly, but it's noticeable. And like I mentioned before, the speakers are a huge upgrade from the Switch 1 as well. They actually sound really good. Now, while I'm super happy this plays in handheld mode, it's not perfect. The biggest issue is the battery life. Yikes. Personally, I don't think it's horrible, but generally speaking, Fortnite on Switch 2 gives you just over 2 hours of battery life. That seems to be the average so far on the console in general, and it's still better than most handheld PCs out there. But compared to the Nintendo Switch OLED's average, at 5 hours, yeah, it's kind of rough in comparison. Now, these are just rough estimates. It depends on brightness, sound, and which mode you're even playing, but still, 2 hours isn't amazing compared to the Switch 1, but it's definitely fine considering the quality we're getting. I really don't have a problem with it. 2 hours sounds pretty good to me. Another odd handheld mode quirk is that mouse mode. Unfortunately, it doesn't just seamlessly transition like the Switch 2 home screen does. You actually need to manually enable or disable it. So if I'm playing docked with mouse mode on and then pick it up to play handheld, it doesn't automatically switch from mouse mode to stick controls like you'd expect. You've got to go into the settings again. And it's weird. Sometimes it boots up into handheld and works just fine, and then after I land or tap the screen, it randomly switches into mouse mode. I think the automatic transition just needs to be something added in a future patch or something. I'm sure they'll figure it out. It's not game breaking, it's just a little janky at first. Another feature the Switch 2 brings that I've actually been using is game chat, built right onto the console itself. Now yes, Fortnite has its own native voice chat, even on the Switch 1, but that voice chat can't do things like share your screen or show your face to your friends while you game. Game chat is kind of its own thing and doesn't really have to do with Fortnite directly, but using it in Fortnite is much better than using Fortnite's built-in voice chat. Now, for most people, this probably isn't useful because everyone has to be on the Switch 2 to use it, so yeah, that really just depends. If your friends have Switch 2 game chat, then use that. It really just depends on what systems your other people are playing on. Unfortunately though, the Switch 2 is missing a handful of features, and for no real reason. Like the FPS counter. What happened to that? They used to have an FPS counter on the Switch 1 and then they just removed it. It's still on other platforms, just not on Nintendo's. I kind of get it not wanting to show on the Switch 1 because it would probably say help most of the time, but on the Switch 2, come on, let me see the frame rate. It's kind of sus why it's not here. One thing that is finally here though is replay mode. Now you can actually view replays of your matches. Yay. However, we're still not done talking about what they removed. Another huge absence with this version is the ability to play split screen. And this is the perfect console to do it. I mean, the Nintendo Switch is literally a family console. Now, I totally understand why this wasn't available on the Switch 1, because if they tried to get it running on there, you would need to have firefighters on speed dial. But it's so odd to me that they didn't add it to the Switch 2 version. Seriously, I don't understand. We already know it's not a hardware limitation. The Xbox One and PS4 can do split screen. So why can't the more powerful Switch 2 do it? It just makes no sense to me. Maybe we'll see it in a future update, but I really would have liked to see it available at launch, especially with a game like Fortnite Festival. That mode is ultra peak and split screen. Heck, Festival even supports 4-player split screen on other consoles. So yeah, it's just odd that they didn't do it here. I'm positive they'll eventually bring it over though. I mean, it did take a while for them to get split screen working on any system, and even LEGO and Festival didn't have it at launch. So maybe I just need to be a little bit more patient. Okay, you got me, sure. Now, one major mode I'm really surprised is still missing is one I've never actually played, but I know a lot of people like it. The original Fortnite Save the World. Basically, the story mode. On Switch 1, this was never playable. They just removed it, which is fair. It's probably too technically advanced for that console. But again, the Switch 2 could absolutely run it. So it's weird that it's not here on a Nintendo platform. And I'm pretty sure it gets minor updates still, so maybe eventually. I think a lot of these issues or missing features have to do with the fact that this literally just launched on the Switch 2, and it's still a new console. I definitely think things like split screen and Save the World will eventually be added. It just takes some time to figure it out. Even with regular Fortnite right now, there are still some bugs that I've seen. One of my friends who also has the Switch 2 has this issue where his Fortnite just keeps crashing on him. Like he'll just be casually playing and then boom, a problem occurred. And then in my game, he's just like moonwalking. It's kind of odd. Again, I think future patches will smooth all this out. Fortnite on the Nintendo Switch 2 actually changes the way this game is played for console players. It genuinely gives people a competitive advantage if they use a mouse. I know you can plug in a mouse to other consoles, but let's be honest, nobody actually does that. It's just so much more convenient to have it on the system built in. There are even rumors that Switch players have their own servers, and if that's true, if one person plays on the Switch 2 and one of them plays on the Switch 1, the Switch 2 person would absolutely demolish them. I'm just happy to see that ongoing port and updates aren't slowly breaking the system like they were with the Switch 1. Who knows how many more updates the Switch 1's gonna have before they just completely stop supporting it. But I'm gonna be honest, the best part of this version is the free exclusive emote you get just for loading Fortnite up on the Nintendo Switch 2. If that doesn't make you want to get a Switch 2, I don't know what will. Do you have a Nintendo Switch 2 yet? And have you played Fortnite? Tell me what you think in the comments. Also, look at all these names. If you want your name here, consider becoming a channel member and support the channel. That would be epic. YouTube thinks you're gonna want to watch one of these videos, and hey, consider liking and subscribing. Oh, by the way, you can use code Vandy in the item shop. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.